welcome to the February APQC Knowledge Management webinar. We're going to be focusing on 2024 priorities and predictions for KM today. So we'll jumpstart 2024. At the end of 2023, we sent out a survey to KM experts and practitioners. We want to really hear about what are the top objectives and upcoming priorities as it relates to KM. We had about 230 global participants this year, and this research is really looked at as a pulse check on KM's current state and also a look into what the future holds from a KM perspective as well. Okay, so looking at threats, the top threats to KM over time traditionally stay pretty consistent. We're usually always looking at a lot of those same things, the way people feel, maybe overworked, they might not have time to do KM. KM can be hard to measure. That's something that we're always focused on. Always good to revisit those core areas that sometimes we can become a little complacent about because we've been doing it for a while, maybe. So I think it'll be good to really look at some new and traditional ways of measuring KM so we can continue that value proposition. So the interesting thing about the threats and the opportunities that always surprises me is that the leadership component is always in both. Leaders are seeing knowledge management and knowledge loss risk as something they need to pay attention to on the opportunity side, but on the threat side, it also says leaders are focused on what they perceive to be more urgent priorities, right? So there's always this fine balance of staying connected with our leaders, ensuring they understand the value proposition, but making sure that we are helping them to stay focused on what is most urgent for the organization as well. So it's always a fine line with leadership. But it's good to keep it front and center and to stay connected with those business areas so that your KM strategies are focused on the business strategies first and foremost. Number 4 this year is new on our list, though this is the one thing that did change, that moved up. I'm surprised it's the first year that it's really been in the top 5 in a while, to be honest, but that's people dealing with a lot of change. Now you're going to see a change. You're going to see an AI thread throughout our discussion today, and you're going to see a change thread throughout our discussion today. So lots going on in the field of change. And this is where it truly impacts the individual and their behaviors and the expectations of how they work every day and how that makes them feel, right? So we need to make sure that we're keeping in mind that there is a lot of change happening, and where does KM fall in that mix, right? Again, where are we showing the value from the knowledge management perspective? Number 5 on the list, it seems to always be on here as well, and that is about how do we incentivize knowledge sharing and reuse. And every organization thinks about this differently. Some people just look at it more from an informal perspective, but those best practice organizations that really get this nailed down typically have the more incentives tied to real live measures, right? This is what I'm expected to do as part of my job. This is in my performance review. I'm rewarded as such for this kind of behavior. So just some of those things to keep in mind as we go forward with the threats.
I think we have to remember on number 5, in the early days of KM, we said right away that knowledge sharing had to have some intrinsic value. Mm-hmm. And I think we just have to remember that and figure out what that is.
How it impacts people. Number 4 and 5 strongly related to each other. Absolutely agree with that. Great comment.